Why am I a libertarian? Because no one likes to be controlled or forced. Because freedom leads to creativity and prosperity. Because I would rather gently persuade people than control or force them. Because control is an illusion anyway. Because human hearts and desires are what really matters in life. Because everyone wants and deserves to be treated like responsible human beings. Because I believe in do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Because peace is the way. Because I don't want to rule over other people. Because love is always the best way to relate to others. Because of my love for my fellow human beings, I am a libertarian. Because force is for cowards. Because the idea of asking the government or anyone for permission for anything I have a right to do is repugnant to me. Because I can now see through all the bullshit and refuse to accept the fact that we are being used as collateral, as American tax cows to terrorize people all over the world. Because anything less than respect for the rights of others would be uncivilized. I'm a libertarian because other people aren't my property. I'm a libertarian because I don't want to be told how to live my life, and I don't want to participate in controlling the lives of others. Because I have realized that I had contradictions in my beliefs. So libertarianism is the result of the never-ending journey of correcting them. I'm a libertarian because I read the news with skepticism. I'm a libertarian because of the global war on terror and the police state and the politicians who lord over us and the theft and the crime and the lies and the lies. I'm a libertarian because I have hope for humanity that a better world is possible. That we are capable of achieving a society that embraces freedom as defined by universal nonviolence. Why am I a libertarian? Because I'm a free, beautiful, independent human being, and so are you. The real question is, why haven't you figured out that you're a libertarian yet? And today is Monday. What is it? Monday, April 21st. I should remember yesterday was Weed Day. Yeah. Happy 420 for those of you that missed it. We have an exciting update. In fact, if you go to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Adam Kovic, you'll see we have a video from Jacob Kelly and an interview about his Smokedown Prohibition event in Youngstown, Ohio. Hopefully we'll get him to call in today and give us an update on how that went down. But apparently the officers threatening to arrest everyone stood down. So congratulations to Jacob Kelly and everybody else who had a wonderful 420, committed some acts of defiance. I know the Adam versus the Man audience was very well engaged yesterday. We had a great time at the beach. For those of you that came out to the Santa Monica Pier, thank you so much for joining us. It's a wonderful conversation for improving the show. Got to meet some hardcore fans. And for those of you that didn't make it, well, we've got a couple more events planned for the LA area, so stay tuned for that. We are still trying to hire a producer. If you'd like to join us in that, we are paying $600 a week to help with the post-production for the show, as well as taking volunteers who want to help out with the editorial process or post-production. And sponsors. We are looking for people to sponsor Adam vs. the Man, so if you're interested in reaching out to the Adam vs. the Man audience, please let us know. Adam@AdamVersusTheMan.com. We're still collecting music as well for the pre-show mix. Sorry, I haven't gotten the time yet. This past weekend was kind of busy, but we have a lot of wonderful suggestions for music lined up in our inbox that we'll be bringing to the pre-show from now on. So really appreciate that. And let's see, I guess, as always, send your love mail to Adam@AdamVersusTheMan.com. Oh, and thanks to everybody who has donated, especially recently, now that we're back on the air, to keep us on the air. AdamVersusTheMan.com/invest. Please check it out. The website is still coming along. We have we're going to be getting the chat going for the live show. I know that's not up yet, and a lot of people who enjoyed that in the last iterations of the live show really enjoyed that. But we have a lot more coming. So, top headlines today. Actually, over the weekend, the Huffington Post had the wonderful headline emblazoned, "Glitch, please." Get it? It had a picture of Obama, you know, doing this thing, yeah, wiping the dirt off his shoulders. Now, see, if it was a conservative website, like making a comment about the Obama administration's attitude towards everything or anything, making a play on some kind of urban slang like "bitch, please," racist. But when you're the Huffington Post liberal website and, oh, well, you couldn't possibly be racist because, you have black friends after all, then it's okay. And you can say, yeah, glitch, please. The title actually of the story from Huffington Post is Obamacare signups hit 8 million in remarkable turnaround. Now, this is the remarkable turnaround that we've been expecting for Obamacare, right? I mean, 330 something million Americans, universal health care coverage for all now, courtesy of the Obama administration. And no, 8 million. I know, if you have no perspective whatsoever, that sounds like a lot of people have signed up for Obamacare. But if you think, for all of the money and effort that's been invested in Obamacare, I mean, just getting this law passed, just if you took all of the hot air and generated electricity with it from, all the hot air coming out of Capitol Hill, you'd have more than enough to, money from that to pay for healthcare for at least these 8 million people. In a remarkable rebound from the botched rollout of Obamacare, 8 million people have signed up for private health insurance via the exchanges created by the Affordable Care Act since October, President Obama announced during a press briefing at the White House Thursday. Oh, so it's they've signed up for private health insurance thanks to government. Yeah, if it wasn't for government, they couldn't sign up for private health insurance. Okay, so there's a subsidy. Yeah, I know, it's more complicated than that. March and April saw an uptick in the share of young people signing up for private plans using the exchanges. These people who are presumably healthier are needed to balance out the medical costs of older, sicker consumers. About 35% of people who signed up throughout the open enrollment period were under 35 years old, including children. 28% were between 18 and 34. The official 6-month enrollment period ended March 31st, but the federal government and most states accommodated people trying to complete applications in April amid a last-minute surge for subsidized private coverage and Medicaid benefits. Now, I want to give a little perspective to this, and there's some people are wondering, like, why did it come about this way? Like, why did Obamacare signups happen at the rate they did and the timing they did? And why is it that we see this remarkable turnaround, right before tax day? Well, the answer might come to us from the Daily Caller. California tax preparers paid bounty for every Obamacare signup. Tax preparing companies are getting paid by an Obamacare exchange to enroll people in Obamacare plans. At least 79 tax service providers, including offices of major companies like Liberty Tax Service and Jackson Hewitt Tax Service, are listed as certified Obamacare enrollment entities in the state of California. Now, are they required to disclose this when they're signing people up or doing their taxes here in California? I kind of doubt it. So it's like, all right, here you go. Let me help you pay less in taxes. I'm you provide a legitimate service, and yes, Liberty Tax Service. It's like Liberty Theft Service. I mean, if you understand what taxation really is and means, a little bit ironic there, but that's okay. They are providing the legitimate service of helping people manage the demands of government with giving up as little as they absolutely have to. But do you think they're saying, oh, and by the way, the state of California is paying me to tell you that you should sign up for Obamacare now too? Yeah, kind of doubt that. Certified enrollment entities are paid a flat fee of $58 per successful application and $25 per successful annual renewal. The enrollment entities, according to California Health Benefit Advisors, quote, the enrollment entities compensate the individual enrollment counselors. Now, there's nothing wrong with that hypothetically, like if you were running a private exchange and you're paying people to sign people up, sure. But when you have the government involved the way that you do for Obamacare and for taxes, and you're forcing people into a situation against their will to begin with, you've kind of got a little bit of a problem in how this interferes with people actually interacting in the free market. So this 8 million turnaround is really, look, what did we do? We bribed tax preparers in order to get other people to sign up, to really, to help the government's coercive process along, because it wasn't enough. This is really important to point out. It wasn't enough for Obamacare to say, we are threatening you with a fine if you don't buy our services, because most people said, well, it sounds like I can evade that. I can avoid paying that fine, or, maybe it's better to just, try to just pay the fine and it's cheaper than healthcare and deal with it some other way. So this is the measure of the state of Obamacare now. You have to also lie to people more at the level of tax preparation to get them to enroll in Obamacare. As Obama said at his press conference, this law is working. This law won't solve all the problems in our healthcare system. We know we've got more work to do, but we know now for a fact that repealing the Affordable Care Act would increase the deficit, raise premiums for millions of Americans, and take away insurance from millions more. Yep, you're dependent now, so we can't possibly repeal it. Obama urged Republicans who remain almost universally opposed to the health care law to move on. Quote, I find it strange that the Republican position on this law is still stuck in the same place that it has always been. They still can't bring themselves to admit that the Affordable Care Act is working. And yet we hear stories every day of people whose claims are denied, of people who are getting the same crappy insurance services from these insurance companies under Obamacare that they were under the crazy free market that we were enjoying before this. Which brings me to the next story here. Hey Sierra, can you get Baloo out of here? He's just chewing himself. Poor puppy. Yes, my dog here has allergies. I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, that has become a distraction. But I guess before we get to more socialism in the United States from the Huffington Post, I'd like to share a story from Tehran. This comes via AFP and AlArabiya.net. Mother spares life of son's killer with slap in Iran. Now you might be thinking, oh, it's those crazy Iranians. Oh, if somebody gets murdered, all they do is slap a guy in the face and they let him go. Well, no, the story is a little more complicated than that. And actually, we have a valuable lesson to learn from the Iranians here. We, the collectivized American people living under the American justice system, in terms of how this actually reflects real justice. Now, it is important to point out in America, we don't have a justice system. We have a legal system. It has nothing to do with justice whatsoever, except that it perverts justice and pretends to serve justice in order to allow the government to keep this racket going. A system based on justice would be based on self-ownership, restitution for victims, punishment that is based on achieving reparations or making victims whole, not on what punishment really is, which is, by definition, causing pain in order to change or manipulate someone else's behavior or provide some kind of revenge emotional gratification. Punishment is contradictory to any legitimate concept of justice, because if you are hurting someone, not in order to defend yourself, or not in order to reclaim stolen property, you are hurting someone, you are causing them pain or suffering to manipulate their behavior, or to cause them pain, or to give yourself some kind of emotional satisfaction, you are creating injustice. And obviously, well, that's 90% of the American legal system, right? An Iranian mother spared the life of her son's convicted murderer with an emotional slap in the face as he awaited execution with the noose around his neck. The dramatic climax followed a rare public campaign to save the life of Bilal, who at 19 killed another man, Abdullah Hossein Zadeh, in a street fight with a knife back in 2007. Now, it's important to point out, like, this guy hasn't, completely gotten off the hook. It's not like, he killed a guy and then got slapped and that was it. No, 7 years ago. So he's been either going through legal processes or in jail for most of that time. Sharq newspaper said police officers led Bilal to a public execution site in the northern city of Naushar as a large crowd gathered on Tuesday morning. Samareh Alinejad, mother of the victim who lost another son in a motorbike accident 4 years ago, asked the crowd whether they know how difficult it is to live with an empty house. Bilal, black-hooded and standing on a chair before a makeshift gallows, had the noose around his neck when Alinejad approached. She slapped him in the face and removed the rope from his neck, assisted by her husband, a former professional footballer. As she said, quote, I am a believer. I had a dream in which my son told me that he was at peace and in a good place. After that, all my relatives, even my mother, put pressure on me to pardon the killer. As she said, the murderer was crying, asking for forgiveness. I slapped him in the face. That slap helped to calm me down. Now that I've forgiven him, I feel relieved. Bilal said, quote, the slap was the space between revenge and forgiveness. I've asked my friends not to carry knives. I wish someone had slapped me in the face when I wanted to carry one. That was said Bilal in an interview. Now, In America, what do we see in the application of the death penalty? Now, in Iran, I'm not trying to judge here the entire legal system. Obviously, it has its problems. It's a government-run system. They do kill people for messed up things as punishment. And there was a place, by the way, now under a system of justice, a truly, righteous system, there is a place for the death penalty. If you are completely, and I mean you as a society, as people, whoever it is, addressing a murderer, someone who is a legitimate violent threat to society, you are incapable of isolating them from the rest of society. There's no other option. But in order to save the lives of other people, you have to kill this person. Okay, fine. You better be damn sure you got the right guy. You better be damn sure they're guilty. You better be damn sure that this is the only option if you are going to so violate the rights of another as to kill them. But now that we live in, the capable society that we live in, that we have for the last several hundred, maybe thousands of years, where we have had the architectural construction capability to build structures where we can keep someone alive, preserve the value of their life without, with a reasonable reassurance that they're not going to escape. And by the way, yes, it's really kind of a disgrace to government. If anything, another reason why it is so invalid in doing this, that we have had this ability for thousands of years, really, since brick and mortar, and who knows? I mean, going way back, we have had the capability to build structures to house people where we can be reasonably sure that they are not going to escape. And yet prison breaks have happened under governments all the time because they are so fundamentally irresponsible to justice. They don't have any incentive to prevent people from escaping. In fact, they have an incentive to allow people to escape because it means more crime and it means an excuse for more government spending. Yeah, imagine that. So when we have the death penalty applied in the United States, what do we see? We see families of victims going into courtrooms saying, or watching execution saying, oh yes, it gave me such relief, such release. Or yes, I felt that justice was served because my family member's victim or murderer was killed by government. Do you see how sick that is as a means of vengeance, or just how emotionally stunted we are as Americans by the measure of how we address the death penalty and justice in America from a perspective of vengeance? Now, it's certainly more rational to think, well, if we can preserve the life of someone, no matter how dangerous they are, if we can find value in that, if we can say, you know what, you have given up your right to self-ownership. You have committed such an egregious crime that we can now, as victims, claim ownership over you. If you could own someone that way, legitimately, because they had done that, would you really kill them? Or would you want to preserve their life and allow them not only to continue to live, but to be productive and serve you? Now, in a real system of justice, you could have this where, a perpetrator, someone who commits such a violent crime, maybe is not simply killed and discarded, but is put to good use for society in a cage, isolated, and allowed to work to benefit the victims, to work to make them whole. I mean, does it really make your life better when someone who has wronged you is punished? If you're sick, twisted in the way that so many Americans are, yes, you might get some strange emotional gratification from that, but do you really benefit? Does it make your life better? Are you going, oh yeah, thank goodness that person's dead. If that person was alive, I'd be miserable. I mean, do you know how many other potential killers there are walking around? So this is a bit more of a complex story that we have in Iran, but we see when the government gives you the option as a victim to say, you know what, I don't want this person to be killed, we get a better approximation, at least, of real justice that we might enjoy from a voluntary, peaceful, free market system. A high-profile campaign was launched by public figures including Adel Ferdosapour, a popular football commentator and TV show host, and former international footballer Ali Daei, appealed for the victim's family to forgive the killer. According to the UN, more than 170 people have been executed in the Islamic Republic since the beginning of 2014. Yeah, okay, so we got to put this in that kind of perspective. There They do have this one little nice safety valve, but they do kill a lot of people for bullshit reasons in Iran. But then you step back, a little greater perspective, and you think of all the, let's see, how many people has Obama killed with drone strikes since the beginning of 2014? Probably on the same par with that, but there are a lot more victims of American imperialism than just those. Under the country's interpretation of Islamic Sharia law enforced since the 1979 revolution, murder and several other crimes are punishable by death. But the victim's family has the right to spare a convict's life in return for blood money under Islamic law, and certainly we can at least take one lesson in justice in this regard from Iran. From Huffington Post, by Senator Bernie Sanders, who are the Koch brothers and what do they want? Yeah, believe it or not, the guy who wrote this is a United States Senator. Thank you, state of Vermont. As a result of the disastrous Citizens United Supreme Court decision, billionaires and large corporations can now spend an unlimited amount of money to influence the political process. Okay. Now, you would think if you were a United States Senator, and you got to be pretty smart just to get into that position, you'd have a little more perspective. And I have to wonder if Bernie Sanders is really so delusional as to make a statement like this, or he's just trying to hoodwink his constituents to think he's the great liberal crusader that he is. Because it wasn't like before Citizens United that billionaires and large corporations found ways to put as much money as they wanted to into subverting the political process. Hello. The results of that decision are clear. In the coming months and years, the Koch brothers and other extraordinarily wealthy families will spend billions of dollars to elect right-wing candidates to the Senate, the House, governor's mansions, and the presidency of the United States. These billionaires already own much of our economy. That apparently is not enough. Now they want to own the United States government as well. Oh, the drama. Oh my gosh, they're going to own the government. Wait. What are they going to do? They're going to take it away from the banksters that Bernie Sanders is conveniently ignoring, pretty much already own the entire government? 4 years ago, the Supreme Court handed down a 5-4 ruling in Citizens United versus the Federal Election Commission. A few weeks ago, they announced another horrendous campaign finance decision in McCutcheon versus the FEC, giving even more political power to the rich. Now, many Republicans want to push the Supreme Court to go even further in the name of free speech. They want the court to eliminate all restrictions on campaign spending, a position that Justice Thomas supported in McCutcheon, and a view supported by the chairman of the RNC, Republican National Committee. Importantly, as a means of being able to exercise unprecedented power over the political process, this has been the position of the Koch brothers for at least the last 34 years. Which is a convenient distraction to how badly we're getting screwed in ways that Bernie Sanders, along with everybody else in the United States Congress, supports. The Koch brothers are the second wealthiest family in America, making most of their money in the fossil fuel industry. Now, what's really funny is that people who aren't libertarians tend to be very bad at asking why and properly diagnosing a problem. They simply, make assumptions and just sort of go off the cuff with whatever sounds or feels right rather than going for some kind of rational analysis. So as a libertarian, I like to ask why. Why is government necessary? And it turns out it's not. And you get none of the right answers that government wants you to get when you honestly, openly ask why and are looking for the truth. So you might ask, why are the Koch brothers the second wealthiest family in America? Why do we have this insane concentration of wealth and power in the first place? Could it possibly be because government exists to serve its sponsors to make the rich richer and the poor poorer? Gee, Bernie, did you think about that? According to Forbes magazine, they saw their wealth increase last year from $68 billion to $80 billion. In other words, under the anti-business, socialist, and oppressive Obama administration, their wealth went up by $12 billion in 1 year. In their 2012 campaigns, Barack Obama and Mitt Romney each spent a little more than $1 billion. For the Koch brothers, spending more than Romney and Obama combined would be a drop in their bucket. They would hardly miss the few $1 billion. Now, so Bernie, you put anti-business, socialist, and oppressive in quotes. So you're saying that the Obama administration isn't anti-business, they're not socialist, and they're not oppressive? Imagine that. So the Obama administration that's using the same kind of bullshit socialist rhetoric that you are ends up making the rich richer and the poor poorer? Gee, say it ain't so, Bernie. Given the reality that the Koch brothers are now the most important and powerful players in American politics, it is important to know what they want and what their agenda is. Well, gee, if you just took a look at, how they got rich and understand that if it wasn't for corporatism, if it wasn't for government subsidizing the oil and gas industry through paying for the roads, if it wasn't for all of the other policies of corporatism, then, gee, you might have an answer to why the Koch brothers got as rich as they are, and then why they want what they want, and according to their agenda, as you put it forth here. It was not widely known that David Koch was the Libertarian Party vice presidential candidate in 1980. He believed that Ronald Reagan was much too liberal. Well, duh, Ronald Reagan only used conservative rhetoric to foist more liberal policies on the American people. He raised taxes, he passed gun control, he negotiated with terrorists, and he cut and run. I mean, how, by the typical definition of what conservatives think of as liberal, yeah, Reagan was the least Reagan-esque president of his administration. He believed that Ronald Reagan, despite Mr. Koch putting a substantial sum of money into the campaign, his ticket only received 1% of the vote. Most Americans thought that the Libertarian Party platform of 1980 was extremist and way out of touch with what the American people wanted and needed. Fast forward 34 years and the most significant... Wait, now hold on. There's one other thing I got to point out here. Out of touch with what the American people wanted and needed. I mean, I'm a senator. Let me tell the American people what they need. And what they need is a violent system of coercion and central control that I am going to administer for them and help vote for the policies of as a U.S. Senator. Fast forward 34 years and the most significant reality in modern politics is how successful David Koch and like-minded billionaires have been in moving the Republican Party to the extreme right. Amazingly, much of what was considered extremist and kooky in 1980 has become part of today's mainstream Republican thinking. Let me give you just a few examples. In 1980, Libertarian vice presidential candidate David Koch ran on a platform that called for abolishing the minimum wage. 34 years ago, that was an extreme view of a fringe party that had the support of 1% of the American people. Today, not only does virtually every Republican in Congress oppose raising the $7.25 an hour minimum wage, many of them, including Republican leaders like Mitch McConnell and John McCain, are on record for abolishing the concept of the federal minimum wage. Yeah, imagine that. Maybe the economy will be better off if we have opportunities for poor people. Oh, geez, did we not just have this national conversation? If only for the moral case here, if someone wants to work for $5 an hour and someone wants to employ them for $5 an hour, do you really think it's right to step in between and point a gun at them and say, if you do that, you're going to jail? Do you really think that's a good way to create opportunities for poor people? Well, yeah, if you think of opportunities as the kind of crazy minimum wage slave jobs that we saw for prison guards when I was in jail, or as inmates, that's right, you can always send them to jail, Bernie. In 1980, the platform of David Koch's Libertarian Party favored the abolition of Medicare and Medicaid programs. 34 years ago, that was an extreme view of a fringe party that had the support of 1% of the American people. Today, the mainstream view of the Republican Party as seen in the recently passed Ryan budget is to end Medicare as we know it, cut Medicaid by more than $1.5 trillion over the next decade, and repeal the Affordable Care Act. According to the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities under the Ryan plan, at least 40 million people, 1 in 8 Americans, would lose health insurance or fail to obtain insurance by 2024. Most of them would be people with low or moderate incomes. As opposed to, let's say, can we figure out a way to provide health care for people in America without pointing guns at each other? Can we turn away from the system that's gotten us in the mess that we are in? Can we get away from the Affordable Care Act, another law written by insurance companies? In 1980, the platform of the party called for the repeal of fraudulent, virtually bankrupt, and increasingly oppressive Social Security system. Now, he's saying, again, that was an extreme view of a fringe party. Oh, yes. Now, the Republican Party is mainstream and it believes that entitlement reform is absolutely necessary. For some, this means major cuts in Social Security. For others who believe Social Security is unconstitutional or a Ponzi scheme, this means privatization of Social Security or abolishing this program completely for those who are under 60 years of age. Do you really think that we can't provide for retirement for other people without pointing guns at them, that we have to force people into the system? Do you really think, Bernie, that let's just trust the government with all of our retirement savings? You think That's really a good plan. David Koch's Libertarian Party platform stated, quote, "We oppose all personal and corporate income taxation, including the capital gains tax. We support the eventual repeal of all taxation. As an interim measure, all criminal and civil sanctions against tax evasion should be terminated immediately." Now, this is unfortunately still relatively an extreme view because most Americans are with Bernie Sanders here and believing in the statist paradigm that it's okay to point guns at people, to take money from them in order to give it to people that you think deserve it more. Personally, I think that's wrong, and Bernie Sanders is dead wrong on this, along with everything else. Here's what every American should be deeply concerned about. The Koch brothers, through the expenditure of billions of dollars and the creation and support of dozens of extreme right organizations, have taken fringe extremist ideas and made them mainstream within the Republican Party, and now with Citizens United, which is allowing them to pour unlimited sums of money into the political process, their power is greater than ever. And let's be very clear, their goal is not only to defund Obamacare, cut Social Security, oppose an increase in the minimum wage, or cut federal funding for education. Their worldview and eventual goal is much greater than all of that. They want to repeal every major piece of legislation that has been signed into law over the past 80 years that has protected the middle class, the elderly, the children, the sick, and the most vulnerable in this country. Every piece of legislation. Oh, Bernie. Oh, Bernie. I'm sorry. I really hope you're not as stupid as your constituents. I hope you're not as gullible as you presume your audience to be. But do you really think that the legislation of the last 80 years has protected the middle class? Do you think it's protected the elderly? Do you think children being ripped from their homes by CPS, Child Protective Services all over this country, you think that's protecting the children? You think selling them into debt slavery? And that's what it is when you're born into America and your share of the national debt is hundreds of thousands of dollars. You think that's protecting the children? The truth is that the agenda of the Koch brothers is to move this country from a democratic society with a strong middle class to an oligarchic form of society in which the economic and political life of the nation are controlled by a handful of billionaire families or senators on Capitol Hill. Really, you think what we have right now, Bernie, is a democratic society? I mean, just holy crap. Like, we don't already live in this world where government is designed by its sponsors in the banking and corporate class, the handful of billionaire families that you point out. They're not calling for the abolition of government. If anything, the Koch brothers are, farther along the line in taking away their own power and saying, yes, please dismantle all of these programs so that we have less advantages, so that the playing field can be more level, so that everybody can prosper the way that we have. Now, if anything, if the Koch brothers were as honest in their rhetoric as they were back in 1980, as you want to hearken back to, Mr. Sanders, we'd be a lot better off. Unfortunately, the result of the Koch brothers has been a perversion of libertarianism away from its true voluntarist, non-aggressive, universal nonviolence philosophical perspective to what we have today, calling for the Constitution and keeping all of the fundamental policies in place that have made their wealth possible. But Bernie, by trying to attack them, you reveal your own complicity in this system and only serve to further entrench it with your bullshit, delusional rhetoric. All right, time to go to our first guest now. We've got Brett Cantwell on the line here, and very excited about this. I'm sorry we didn't announce the guests earlier in the show today. But Brett Cantwell is a friend of mine who actually helped, and for those of you who might have seen some of our CPAC videos from this year, he was the man behind the camera for all of these. So, ladies and gentlemen, Brett is a former infantry Marine. He served from 2007 to 2012. He currently works at a water treatment plant, and right now he's blowing the whistle so people can see the poison that they already know is in the water. Brett, thank you so much for joining us today.
How's it going, bud?
Outstanding. I'm really excited to have you on to get you in front of our audience with this unique perspective, because I think most people know there's fluoride in the water, but they don't have a sense of how or why it gets there. So why don't you just give us a little bit about your background? How does someone become the guy that puts fluoride in the water?
Well, I thought I was lucky when I got the job because I was working, I was cutting down trees, working for a tree company, and like getting paid really low wage, and I just got lucky because of my service as a Marine, and the boss was a Marine. And he was like, "Hey, I'll get you this job," and I was like, "Sweet, I'm making some good money finally." I went and bought a house, and then it's like, "Oh well, that wasn't as cool as I thought it was either." But
you mean being tied into the banking dominated housing system? Yeah. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. And I thought it was great for a while. I was like, "Yeah, I'm actually doing a good service." But when I realized that, I mean, why I'm a whistleblower is it was just common sense.
All right, well, hold on. I think our viewers want to get a little more perspective on how you got to this point. So you were working a shitty labor job, and you wanted a way out, and you had an opportunity. You had a veterans connection, and he said, "I can get you this job." But there's a training process, right? What was the training process, and what did you have to go through before you got into this relatively seemingly cushy gig?
Well, it's 2 years on the job experience. And that's, so you're like, I'm still in that. So I have to be trained on the job for 2 years. There's a big book about this big and a section of fluoride about this big in it, and you have to learn all that and go and take a test, and it's like a 200 question test. And if you fail, you're out. If you pass, you're in. But there's a lot of training prior to that. But as far as putting fluoride in the water, it's like, yeah, you put this bag in, you wear this, gear, and don't talk about it. Because I had to sign something that said, if you talk about certain things we do here, like putting fluoride in the water, we can fire you.
Okay, so you're still in this training period. Are you comfortable talking about how much money people make doing this job, or at least what's typical in America?
I make $27 an hour.
Damn.
Yeah.
Damn, that's a really cushy gig.
And I like literally press. I mean, unless something breaks, I like sit on a chair and I press a button, and then I wait a couple hours and then press a button, and it's kind of looks like a Star Trek a ship. There's like this wall with a whole bunch of buttons and lights on it, whatnot. I mean, it's really easy unless something breaks, and if something breaks, I have to fix it. And if someone gets hurt or from drinking the water, it falls on me. So it's big. It's more of a responsibility.
But even then, you have a manual. So as long as you can say that you were following procedures, it doesn't matter if someone gets sick, right? That's like that's a defense. If something were to happen, you'd be safe. Okay. And I guess if you're basically sitting, or you're paid $27 an hour to sit around and monitor control them, I guess you've got plenty of time to watch Adam versus the Man and take in other subversive materials. And you said a thick section in your pamphlet about fluoride. What does it tell you in there?
It more so tells you, like, not giving you excuses why fluoride in the water. It's just like, fluoride's in the water. You need to accept that, and then it tells you what it does to the system and how, like, your actual, like, we had this a bind up. We had to change all the pipes in the system because it coats the pipes so much, and you can't even get it out to the populace because it's so bad just for the pipes just in the water plant. So it's like it's more about how to fix the problems that fluoride gives you than why it's in the water.
So wait, what are the problems?
Like, it will, in a year's time, it will build up on the sides. Say you got a pipe that's this big, it'll build up on the sides out, so you got a little pinhole like this, and then all that pressure is stopping and breaking your $1,000 pumps, and it's a whole. I mean, it costs more to fix the stuff that it breaks than to sell it to the populace.
Really? So if fluoride is doing this to the pipes, well, before we get it, I want to ask you, what do you think it's doing to our bodies? But before we get into that, you have a video that you've released. I'm going to pull it up on the monitor here next to you. This is fluoride being dumped in the water, hidden video. We've got it on the monitor here, and we can see that you're wearing a gas mask. So you have some. We can turn up the volume and we can hear some of the machinery clicking away in the background. We're going to turn that off here, but we can see in this video that you're wearing a gas mask and an apron and gloves, and you're picking up a 50-pound bag, right? That looks like, or about 50-pound, kind of concrete bag full of fluoride granules, right? That you're dumping not directly into the water, but into some kind of processor. Can you describe exactly the steps you're going through in this video?
It basically just puts it into hot water, and yeah, I'm taking the bag, opening it up, dumping. I don't know if you have those up or not, but I sent a picture of the back of the bag.
Yes, we'll pull that up and read that. Yeah, absolutely. Would you like me to pull it up and read it here?
Sure.
Okay, so we'll pause this video for just a second, and the label on the bag says, "Warning: poisonous if swallowed or inhaled. Avoid breathing the dust. Wash thoroughly after handling. Clean up spillage immediately. Wear gloves, respirator, and goggles while handling this material. Antidote: if inhaled, remove to fresh air and restore breathing. Contact with skin and eyes. Flush with plenty of water. For eyes, get medical aid. If ingested, give magnesium sulfate and/or milk of magnesia solution with water. Consult physician. Refer to material safety data sheet." And I just want to pull up the other picture you sent here with the picture of the entire bag. It's got the skull and crossbones, toxic. You can see it right here, and it's like this should be pretty obvious to anyone with any common sense. This is not something that belongs in the human body, right?
Yeah. And I just don't think people, see that. They probably think, oh, they say it's good for you. So, it probably comes, in a nice organic bag or something like that,
Well, this is just the ridiculous mythology of fluoride in the water, right? Is that it's good for your teeth. And it's so painfully obvious that is an absurd argument. Like, hypothetically, if your teeth, as a healthy human being, needed a chemical additive to be healthy beyond a well-balanced diet, like your body was not capable of it, and you wanted to treat your teeth with something as strong as this, would you be running it through your teeth and into your stomach? Or putting it on your teeth? I mean, just like
mouth-washing it and spitting it out.
Exactly, right. Doing everything you can to minimize the absorption of this poison. And there is, some very small grain of truth, of legitimacy in the scientific literature to fluoride and teeth, but it's still not anywhere near justifying what we have here in the water supply, and even in most toothpastes. I go with fluoride free when I can. But Brett, how do you think this came to be the norm in America?
Well, I think first off that the biggest problem of it is it doesn't matter if you're on the side you think it's good for your teeth or you think it's bad. The government regulates everyone to have it in for all these. I mean, you have to go and find for your water plant if you have it or not. But even if you don't, it's going to be in food that's processed in America. It's going to be in a water bottle, that's processed in America. It's going to be in Gatorade. It's going to be in anything when it says, yeah, it's from this water plant. You got to go look into that water plant, and they probably use fluoride. There's very few places that don't use fluoride. So you're getting it. You're mandated to have it no matter what. The government is medicating you without your choice. So even if you go and buy a freaking water filter to filter it, you're going to get it through your shower. You're going to get it when you go buy a freaking orange from Florida. You're going to get it somewhere. So that's the biggest problem that I see, is the only way we can fix it is everyone says no. And then there's been states where they've said no, and a year later they sneak it back into their water. So the government is medicating you. That is the biggest problem.
Well, I think if it was medicating, it really wouldn't be so bad, but it's more like poisoning. So
it's poisoning, but it's just wrong.
But what's
You know what I
what's the incentive? What's the incentive here? Obviously, this stuff is coming from somewhere. They're paying for it. Where does it come from?
The stuff from you can see it on the bag for your viewing audience, but it comes from Japan. It also comes from China, and it's from what do you call it? Fertilizer plants.
So it's a waste product. It's a chemical.
Yeah, and it costs a lot of money to get rid of. So what do? They sell it to you and put it in the water.
Well, you're saying because it's too expensive to like dispose of properly as a waste product, chemical companies have just bought off enough local governments in America that they convinced them to put it in the water?
The local governments probably pitched it, but I'm not in a local government, so I can't sure. But it's been going on for like 60 years. What else has been going on? Like this, we're using all old information for the reasons why we should fluoridate people. I mean, remember when doctors used to say, "Hey, smoke frickin' camels; they're good for you," and then we got new information that said, "Hey, that's bad for you." There's new information that says fluoride's really bad for you and frickin' screws your brain up. They're like, "Oh no, we're gonna believe those doctors from 50 years ago." We think that they said it's good for you, and now this is good for everyone. What I'm really worried about, like. There's in Egypt, I believe it was, they had their big protest where everyone came out, and now there's going to be one in May in America. Well, their people weren't fluoridated for the last 60 years. So I don't know. I don't know if a lot of people are going to be like, yeah, well, someone else will do it, or there's already enough people going, or I'm really worried for that, but
now I know you're not a medical doctor or any kind of health expert yourself, but what do you see as the greatest threat to people's health from consuming so much fluoride in the water?
Your brain. It's even if it is good for your bones and good for your teeth, that's where it's stored. So when you drink, from the way I understand it, we put it in. We take water, we clean it, which all cleaning water is making it settle faster. We just all the stuff settles out of, which is just iron and dirt, and then we add chlorine and fluoride into it.
Mm-hmm.
And the chlorine dissipates out of your water, but fluoride doesn't. Like in my video, that's what I said. That's how you test if there's a leak in the line. Is you test it for fluoride. There's plenty of fluoride in here. Well, the only time it leaves that water is when you drink it. I'm not a medical doctor, and maybe I screwed up because I'm not a medical doctor, but I tested fluoride the same way I tested in the water, and I tested it with my urine, and it was not there. So that leads me to believe that it stays in your bones and is added up and stays there. And I don't know if there's any other way that it would leave, but that's, from my common sense, that says that it goes to your body and stays in your bones. And if it's good for your bones, great, but it's terrible for your brain. Terrible.
And now I think most Americans are kind of skeptical when they hear this, right? They're like, wait, it's like the government is putting something in the water that's going to make me dumber because they're getting rid of chemical waste in order to serve special interests. Now, all of that makes sense, but then how is it that, like, I'm not dumb? Drinking water doesn't make me dumb. I'm smart. Like, how do you convince someone, no, this is actually making you dumber? Because you can't just say, well, switch and get away from this forever, and right away you're going to get smart and you're going to feel the difference.
I don't know if right away you're going to get smart and feel the difference after 60 years being fluoridated. That was an argument I had with my mom about it. She's like, I've been drinking fluoridated water for my whole life, and I'm fine. I'm like, yeah, Mom, you're fine. You sit at home and play Facebook games and watch NCIS marathons. You don't go out and there's problems in the world and you don't try to change them because you are so, I don't know what it is, but it's like a almost zombified for your own happiness over your potential is brought down, I believe.
So the evidence of the effect of this is sort of all the dumb things that you see in America happening are being done by people who are drinking fluoridated water.
Dude, it's not even drinking fluoridated water. You're getting it out of everything. Like, it might, me and you might be less affected because we filter our water. But if I break down and go, to a fast food joint or, go buy a Gatorade, I'm getting some form of fluoride in my body. I think that our potential as a country is brought down because of how much fluoride is keeping us down.
Well, we just got a reverse osmosis system put in our house under the sink. Very excited about that. Hopefully we'll bring you some reviews when we've got a little more time to test it out. But we got it put in just last weekend, having just moved into this house pretty recently. Good step in the right direction, right? But it's only in our, in the kitchen. So we're not drinking water with fluoride. We're not putting it in our food. But like you point out, it's already in. I mean, if you're growing oranges in Florida and you're watering them with fluoridated water, that water goes into the ground and it gets absorbed by the plants and it goes into the fruit and that's stuff that you're eating. So is there really just no way to avoid it at that level other than drinking non-fluoridated water and hoping that you're not absorbing too much of it through your skin and through other stuff you're consuming?
I'm not an expert on this at all, man. But from my opinion, if we don't have the mass of people change their thought process about how this is affecting their body and get it changed together, then they're gonna get away with it. Even if you in your local town go and change it for your local water plant. Like I said, like in Florida, it was like 3 years ago. They were like, okay, now the populace isn't looking. We're just going to put it back in the system. So, I mean, I think it has to be a greater awakening to get it changed.
Awesome.
And you know what I mean? I'm just a guy. I'm just a guy who's like, hey, that looks wrong, and I need to tell people about it.
Well, that awakening is happening. People are becoming more aware of this issue every day. And as we've seen from people calling into the show before, we have a lot of Adam versus the Man fans who are local activists and getting involved in this. And it is one of these places where you can change the policy in your city or your municipality or in your county or whatever level it is that your water is being treated at, and do something to change it and radically improve the quality of life for people. So, Brett, thank you for your part in this, and thank you for taking the risk. You've obviously made it clear that you care more about doing the right thing than preserving your job. And if more Americans took that perspective who were engaged in the kind of work that you are, obviously we'd be a lot further along as a country. But still, you're getting paid to poison people, because if you weren't doing it, someone else would simply step in and do it because the politicians, via the people, allegedly are demanding it, right?
Yeah, and I would like to also add that I always suck at saying this word, a conscientious objector to adding fluoride in the water. I've told my boss that I'll never do it again. That video is the last time I've ever done it, and if he fires me for it, he fires me for it. But as of now, it's something you do like every 2 weeks. Put in there, it's like, okay, one of the other guys will do it. It's not, like him is not a big deal. And if I get fired, someone else is gonna do it. But I will never put fluoride in the water ever again.
Well, thanks, Brett. I wish everybody else in your job was taking your stand. Thank you so much for joining us. All right. If you want to get in the queue for Skype, send us a chat at Adam Kokesh. Let's see. Mike writes us, do you believe a peaceful transition of power back to the people is possible, or do you think a tipping point must be reached for people to realize they must take action if a peaceful way is possible? How do you think it may be achieved? All right. Okay. So this is Mike Inga from Kodiak Island, Alaska, who would like to ask if we feel, or if I feel that we are reaching that tipping point in the USA, and how dangerous the tipping point would be if a peaceful transition of power back to the people did not work out. All right, Mike with webcam. Mike, welcome to the show.
Hey, how's it going?
Outstanding. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, no problem. Good to be here.
So you have some big questions on your mind today. Hit it.
Yes, I'd like to know if you feel that a peaceful transition back to the people is possible before violence ensues and people try to promote violence to get their ways heard.
Well, it's a great question, and there are a couple different ways of looking at it. First of all, you could challenge the premise there, and I think the premise of that question is that we are not already experiencing a violent transition. As you know, and just in the last 20 years of the internet, we've had an incredible raising of awareness about the nature of government. They're much less able to hide from the people and hide their criminality, and people are waking up and demanding more freedom. We see a global secessionist movement still developing. We see people fighting back and rising up against the police state here in America. And we see the violent suppression of dissent by governments all over the world, trying to push that tipping point back as far as possible so they can continue their racket. So you might say that, it's impossible, that violence is already happening, and it's not just the normal violence of government doing its thing, just the run-of-the-mill routine violence. It's specifically violence suppressing, getting to this tipping point of understanding. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. The violent overthrow of governments have caused a lot of backlash, with radical groups taking control of areas and spreading more problems than what they try to solve. Do you think that any good transition could come out of the inevitable, or do you think that it would be a continued roll downhill until people realize that there are different ways?
Well, that's a really good question. And my answer before did kind of avoid, I think, the heart of what you're getting at, which is, what is this transition going to look like? And by the way, this is something that is thoroughly addressed in the book that I wrote that's coming out on Independence Day called Freedom. But the transition is, again, it's already happening. People are demanding more self-government as they're waking up, and there will be a tipping point. And what you point at is the power vacuum argument. For a long time, I really resisted the power vacuum argument. As a libertarian advocating for a free society, a stateless society, a voluntary society, when someone said, well, you can't possibly get rid of government, you'll have a power vacuum, and someone will step in to fill it. And there really is some legitimacy to this, but the reason I resisted it is because I knew in the back of my head, well, no, a free society means one in which everybody universally embraces freedom. And even if one person decides for a moment not to and tries to use violence or coercion against someone, they're immediately isolated, or at least no one will join them in doing that or institutionalize that into government. So the transition to a stateless society, it's a question not of is it going to be peaceful or violent, because it's already both. The government is violently resisting the people peacefully demanding that they are free. Now, from that, you can have revolution. You can have the dramatic, possibly violent, immediate overthrow of a particular government body. And that's certainly a step forward. But if that violence done to achieve that is not done out of a righteous sense of justice based on non-aggression and self-ownership, then you're right. You have, as you point out, there have been governments overthrown that resulted in radical elements taking over and creating worse problems. So the question is, what is the revolution of thought behind the revolution in politics? And the revolution of thought, the paradigm shift, is far more important. So like if you had a country like Egypt where they were able to overthrow their government and, then they put in a new one. Well, if instead they overthrew their government and said, you know what, let's not have a central government. Let's just have separate counties or whatever the subdivision of provinces in Egypt is. Let's just have all of those be independent. And the reason they didn't or weren't able to do that is because there were so many moneyed interests at the top who were subsidized by the American foreign aid there that they said, no, we have to keep this money flowing from America. There's too much incentive here. We can't give it up. Let's manipulate the people into thinking they still need to come together as a nation. Let's foster national pride, the Egyptian sense of identity, and then we'll get a new government. And the predictable consequences that you get mercy, and then you get all of the problems that go along with that. So it's still a step forward. And I'd like to be a little more optimistic about these revolutions, because while there is that downside that you so well point out, when that kind of turnover happens, people start thinking outside of the box, right? They start thinking differently. And there is at least some progress in how people think about their government. And there's some encouragement in terms of, yes, we can change things. We don't have to wait for a collapse. At any point, we can rise up as a people and say, we want a different system, and we can get it. And while there's the potential for the backlash and more violence and more authoritarianism coming out of a lot of revolutions, I think the overall effect is still a good one. But, I would hope that not too many people have to get hurt in order for that effect to happen. And really, revolutions aren't the best or most effective way to do that without violence.
Can I add something?
Please.
I believe that the paradigm shift that is set to happen soon, because the old ways are destroying ourselves right now. I believe that today's structure of society and civilization will cause divisions wherever possible. That's the global collective consciousness right now, is divisions. I believe that in a paradigm shift, that conscious collectives are going to be the leading ways into trying to have people look past the fighting and move into progress, because I believe that the new optimal society will be a collective that's may not be connected in any way but through actions, and the actions that they know need to be done.
The voluntary collective of the global free market, perhaps. Now, do you think that's already happening with the internet?
The internet's a great way for people to become connected, and there's a whole bunch of sites where people flock to and to open their minds. We need more of that, and I believe the internet's a great way to just connect everyone, and it's a step, but we still need people's actions and the small things that add up every day. It's pretty much optimal living, and the virtues of patience, curiosity, and compromise is what can bring the actions together from people into tolerance.
Awesome. Well said. Well, I would say there's my favorite part of the internet effect is how it is destroying nationalism. People no longer are identifying as strongly as they once did based on their national identity, because the internet brings people together globally, and they're able to connect and see that people in other countries aren't defined by their governments, but just like them are individual human beings. And I think that's how we're getting to that sense of global consciousness. Although I'd be very hesitant to call it a collective, because it has such terrible status connotations of bringing people together through force of government. But Mike, thanks so much for the call and for sharing that perspective. We go now to Mike Shanklin, our next guest. So, ladies and gentlemen, we go now to Mike. Let's see. We got a wonderful introduction for Mike Shanklin here, and I would be remiss if I did not fully roll out the red carpet for this gentleman. Mike, you have some video for us?
Say that again, Adam. I had trouble hearing you. Let me turn my mic up a little bit.
No worries. Sounds great here. You got video for us?
Yeah, actually. Let me see how I turn this on. Yeah, I'll turn that on. Well, you can get started up. There we go.
All right, roll. Hey, while I'm getting my technical difficulties resolved, you go on rolling out the red carpet there, Adam. All right. Mike Shanklin graduated with an MBA from Campbell University, was a Dean's List Honor Roll recipient and a reporter for the Campbell Times newspaper. He was elected as secretary of the Student Government Association while at Central Carolina. His life's been downhill since then. He founded the Campbell Liberty Club, served as president until he graduated, then went into the private sector as the president for Peace, Freedom, and Prosperity Movement. And then he took the Radio Shack store he managed to the #1 overall store in the world, beating out over 4,400 other stores. And he was probably the only reason Radio Shack didn't go out of business. But I mean, because that's all. I mean, if that you had, I mean, the miracle isn't that you had the top rated Radio Shack store. The miracle is that you had a Radio Shack store that was actually profitable and managed to, float 4,399 other stores. So that's really important. Now, his website, for what he's doing now, he does voluntaryvirtues.com, a show that's been my pleasure to appear on several times, where they have really great panel discussions. And if you check out his YouTube channel, voluntaryvirtues0.com, it's a great place for seeing the videos from that. Now, he is really someone that I appreciate speaking to as a fellow intellectual, because he is similarly passionate and steeped in so much important philosophy about liberty, and someone who has taken a lot of brave stands. But today, I want to take advantage of having him on the show to look at something that I think the libertarian movement in America would be really wise to take a step back from, American politics, and remembering that libertarianism is not a political philosophy; it is an anti-political philosophy, and the freedom movement is not an American movement, but a global movement. Mike, being someone who is really steeped in current events and as philosophically grounded as you are, I know that you are, as I am, and I hope most of our audience, an enthusiast and excitedly following the global, maybe not the global freedom movement quite manifest as such yet, but the global secessionist movement. Is that right?
Well, yeah, thanks for having me on the show, first of all, Adam, and to all the viewers out there who give us the time. Obviously, the passion is in both of us, and so it's obviously an honor to be on your show as well, especially you've done a lot, much bigger work than I have throughout the years, so I do thank you for all your hard work. But yeah, I have been watching over the global secessionist movement as a whole, and I have a lot of mixed feelings about it, right? Because I do see historically that usually a revolution, as you're indicating, does lead from one form of tyranny to another form of tyranny. So it might be a better cage, but it's still a cage nonetheless, right? And so us as voluntarists, we're trying to take all of the cages away. I mean, sure, you're going to have restrictions on hurting other people and other people's property, but we want to free people to where they can do peaceful. People can do whatever they want as long as they don't infringe on others. And so when I look around the world, I see, things like in Venice and Crimea, however you want to pronounce it. And it really is gut-wrenching because, people are saying that they're breaking away from Ukraine, and then all of a sudden they're part of Russia. And again, it's like...
Wait a second.
I don't think they caught on quite yet.
We have the right to be sovereign and independent and decide who our tyrant is going to be next. Yeah, exactly.
That's right. Yeah, and it comes down to the plantation ownership mindset. They just don't see the master and slave relationship that they're really stuck in. Most of them still believe that we're all the masters in democracy, and that, because we're all the masters, the rulership system's okay. But the reality is there's somebody that's going to be a ruler, and there's somebody that's not going to be a ruler. And that's what statism always will bring about, right? Only a voluntary society that's based on individual action and characteristics and objectifying the actual actions itself versus some prejudged, traits or characteristics of another person. That is really the future of the way that I think, evolution, as far as if you're going to call it human evolution and a human society evolution, that's really the next step in the process, is viewing us not as Americans or as Chinese or as any of these other identifiers that are nationalistic, like you're saying, but more as, hey, I'm Mike Shanklin, you're Adam Kokesh, and we base each other on our own individual actions. And I think, this nationalism, this statism, whatever you want to call it, it is nothing more than, a jingoistic, patriotic hoopla to try to get people on both sides just involved into the system that they know is going to trap them. And I think for many years, most people have not been able to see this slave-master relationship, and because of that, how can you see the rest of the system that you're trapped under, right? So as more and more people throughout the world, not just America, but the world as well, multiple languages, Mises Brazil, Mises Japan, they have a lot of Mises organizations that are growing internationally, and people across the globe are seeing that they don't need to run from one cage to another one. They just need to say, hey, let's start thinking about not getting any more cages and truly freeing the world. I guess that's the best analogy I can give right now.
Well, for people that aren't familiar with this, we throw out a term like the global secessionist movement. It might seem like, I think we have a little burden to put forth a little more evidence of this, right? So we've got, in Catalonia, Spain, a very long-standing movement that is gaining momentum over the last couple of years. Italy now, 3 different secessionist movements. We see just headlines today. This is from Scotsman.com. Scottish independence poll, yes, on brink of victory. And by the way, it's just the people of British descent living in Scotland who are, taking that vote the other way. But the native-born or the more Scottish people are saying, yeah, we want independence. You have in the United States, California proposed now to break up into 6 pieces. You have a new state forming potentially in northern Colorado. You have the Free State Project and a lot of secessionists in New Hampshire. Texas has the Republic of Texas has a long-standing secessionist streak. You see, a few years ago, maybe just 2 years ago, it was a bit of a fad. Maybe that's all it was, but certainly represented a broader sentiment when you had this flood of petitions on whitehouse.gov from each of, pretty much every state had one, and they were going, well, how many people in the state want to sign up and say we're for seceding? And it was like you had like huge numbers. I mean, not in the millions, maybe in the millions overall. Yeah, overall it was in the millions, but hundreds of thousands in different states, people calling for this.
And not only, Chechnya, Kurdistan, Cyprus, Wales even broke off. These are just a few European ones that most people haven't even heard of.
Yeah, you can keep going. In South America, there are various movements. But now you brought one to my attention that I wasn't really aware of. What's going on in China with this? The rising superpower.
Well, the thing is, I think it's going to be much harder in China than some of these other, what we could call maybe a little bit more politically freer regions. Imagine trying to break away in North Korea.
Hold on. Yeah. Excuse me. I think this is it just occurred to me. This is a measure of how much we take for granted certain things as not being demands for autonomy. Hello, Tibet.
Yeah, no kidding, right? I know that we should have said that one first off.
Should have been the first one.
Even inside of like the mainland China, hardcore still communist China, where they restrict Facebook access to many of its citizens. In this region, they have especially what's called the Xinjiang province. They have a lot of violent criminal actions by the police there, and the people are getting really, really upset. And actually, what they were messing just the other day on the 19th, they were messing with this one woman who was a street vendor. I don't know what she was selling, but they had an issue with her. They started to get violent. And one of these other good citizens went with a camera to take pictures. Well, they hammered him in the head to death. And the rest of the citizens that saw this, thousands of them, ganged up on the van of these police officers, and they ended up literally killing all 4 police officers, for justice, because they obviously know that the system that they live under is not going to give them real justice. These police officers and the brutality have been getting away with this for years.
Yeah, and
they're just so beaten down. It's so hard.
It's certainly far from an optimal expression of justice, but as you point out, better than what they expect from government, right?
Right. Well, yeah, I'm not endorsing the fact, whether you want to take it as an act of aggression on their own part because they're not playing within the system or something like that. The point is, the system has really been screwing them over, and they have no power to stop it from screwing them over. Right? They're trapped to this violent monopoly. So unfortunately, this has been their only form of defense. This is the only way for them to really stand up, because there is no way you're going to get inside of the Chinese government and vote for secession. That's just impossible. It's you know what I'm saying? It's just impossible.
Right. Okay. Now I know as well as you point out, that the global secessionist movement is very only glancingly grounded in voluntarist or true libertarian moral principles. It's people saying, well, we don't want a big cage, we want a little cage. Instead of a national cage, we want a local cage. And I know my answer to this, but I want to let you go first. If that's the case, why are you excited about this?
Well, I think it is a step in the right direction mentally, because, maybe not the strategy, as far as an actionable strategy, it's probably not the most plausible, but it's good to have people in the mindset to where they at least start the ideal of secession. And what I usually say is, if we believe, if these people have the belief system, they know we shouldn't have this one world government, let alone I shouldn't be trapped to this whole continent. let alone maybe I shouldn't even be trapped to this country, let alone this state, let alone this city, let alone the city block. Why can't I just be me, the individual? This is the direction we need to go, towards the individual, right? That's what individualism is, what breeds the prosperity that helped us escape the Malthusian trap of the lack of private property and all the beauty that that individual freedom, more individual freedom, has brought with it production wise, and has spread the wealth. Ever since that we've escaped the Malthusian trap, real workers' wages has increased 12 times, right? And of course, the gap between rich and poor today is increasing as government, since just the last 113 years, has grown sixfold. So when I look at secession, obviously, we have these huge states that we're trapped under. The more people that we can have break away, the more choice we're going to enable. The smaller that the system is anywhere around us, the more individual choice they actually will have. And in some cases, like in New Hampshire, you can actually have some political gains on a very small level. I don't think you're going to see it too much on other local levels in smaller areas, but like New Hampshire, they actually have a pretty good concentrated political, activist, locale and central there. They have quite a bit of activity going on, and it's producing some good results. But I think the really important thing to hear is just take away from the fact that it is a positive thing that people are thinking more in the secessionist, moving towards the individualist level. The problem we have with that is that every small state is just kind of like, it's like a carrot on a stick that you'll never get to, right? You're just always chasing it, and it always just leads to the bigger government. You give people the right to enslave this much, and before you know it, it's just turned into uncontrollable slavery. And that's what really is is the problem with statism, is that it infringes on private persons and private bodies and property. So one of the things we have to go towards is the individualistic mindset, to realize also in this goal, in this path towards this goal, is to understand that there is no such thing as minimal state. America, if you look back on it, is probably one of the best, at least so far, examples of a minarchist society. And unfortunately, it failed, but I guess we can take it positively as a learning experience to just say, what? Every time somebody does start with the smallest government, it always turns around and turns into the largest government. So we have to be realistic before we just jump and say, well, let's go to this other kind of better looking world, to realize that historically and statistically, it almost always leads back to the thing that the people are trying to escape in the first place. This is why we as voluntarists take this, what sounds like a tremendous leap, but it's really just towards the rationale perspective, right? The reasonist perspective, understanding that we don't have the right to control other people, that we let go of this narcissistic control, voice inside of our heads that's been controlling us ever since we were born into the status world, to understand that, hey, give other people their autonomy, give other people their individual space, let them live their life how they see fit. And this is the right direction. We just need to understand that there is no, middle ground of having this small, minimal slavery state. There's no such thing as minimal slavery. It always blows into something more, which is what we're trying to escape.
You mean you can't just cut out 90% of a cancer? That doesn't work? Now
you can. It just doesn't. It'll come back. Right?
Right. Well, there might be a change in that at this point. Maybe the global secession movement is the first sign of, or the first step in inoculation, perhaps, to stay in that metaphor. But with what you said, you really captured something in the zeitgeist that I don't think I would have described. And that was really beautiful the way that you put that. But I want to add a couple things. And you did kind of touch on the first thing, which is that, smaller governments, you're going to have whatever the negative effect is going to be if it's more local. If something goes wrong, it's going to affect less people. Like if you have the United States federal government and it freaks out and starts a war, it goes into this, military industrial complex spasm and induced spasm. And, all of a sudden 330 million people are dragged along to pay for it and suffer for it and put behind it. Whereas if you have small governments, if one of them freaks out, then at least the problem is isolated. If one of them has a terrible experiment in socialized medicine, we can isolate that, and, other communities are protected from those bad ideas. So there's a huge benefit in local government being less corruptible. And it's not that it's less corruptible by its nature, it's just that it tends to be less corrupted, because it's easier when you have a large central government that's detached from people. But the other thing is with the internet awareness that's come into this movement, is people are figuring out, like, how did we get here? Oh, you mean the United States of America didn't just fall out of God's asshole one day and land on the map as this beautiful, Christian sanctioned nation that was just whole and perfect from the get-go with exactly 50 states represented by... No, it was built by, raping and pillaging the government raping and pillaging its way across the continent, taking over new territories in a war, wars with Canada and the French, and wars with Spain and Mexico.
Native Americans too, on a smaller scale.
Yeah, no, war. Well, yeah, you wouldn't call it wars as much as slaughter, but yeah,
and reservations, yeah.
Yeah, the slaughter of millions of Native Americans at the time, all of these things, and you go, well, why are we tied in? Why don't we separate? And I'd like to think that there's a whole other kind of thing that's going on here that is a product of the internet. And I want to get your take on this in the way that people are changing their concept of how malleable government is. People, even though they're not asking why from a libertarian perspective, they're asking why, at least from a practical, maybe historical perspective. Why is my government set up this way? Why are we in this territory? Why is the United States not 50 different countries? Geez, how did it, because we had this central government that wanted to exert power over as much territory as possible. When you're able to see it in that historic lens, you're able to see it in that proper context. This isn't just a government that wants power because it wants to help people like these benign politicians that love us so much. No, because they're willing to freaking kill millions of innocent people to expand that power and to have that. But if people are saying, you know what, hey, we live in a big cage. Why can't we live in a little cage? Why can't we make it this shape and size and that shape and size and move it over here or move it over there? And the concept of what are borders and what is government becomes a very malleable thing in people's minds. It's very easy to say, well, maybe no government is an option. And to me, that's what's really exciting about this. Because if people are going, it's just all of a sudden, the way it always has been is not the way that it has to be anymore.
Well, I think using chain slavery is a perfect example of this. Not that I want to make it sound like chain slavery has been completely abolished the world over. There's still some places that unfortunately do it, although they say it's supposed to be banned by the government. Of course, it still goes on in those government-controlled regions. But in the same manner, most people think and want chain slavery to be gone, whereas back in the day, it used to be institutionalized, a part of the norm, a cultural norm that everybody just accepted. And, today it's disgusting. And, I can't even imagine living in that type of a scenario, right? Well, that's human evolution. Humans are evolving and adapting all the time. We're growing. Our IQs are actually increasing, whether you like the IQ measurement or not. I think overall cognitive ability is increasing. I think although it is stunted by such things as public education, right? So, I think
if you're going to hold on, internet. Knowing your use of precise terminology, it's not public schools, it's government schools, right?
There you go. I mean, okay. Yeah. But to me, I always associate public with government almost anyway. If it's not public, it's private property. So that's usually the contrast I take it from. But yeah, I do think, going back to your original point, I do see, compared to 5-10 years ago, I think I'm a perfect example of this. I used to be a huge statist, not that I was really active, but, I believed in the state and stuff like that. And I have made a huge transition. And not only that, I've brought a lot of people with me, and every day I connect to somebody new and try and plant some seeds here or there. It is happening in this interconnectivity that we've never seen before, that the internet does make available to us, where we, back in the day, it was like 5 channels back in the 70s on the TV. Think about how many channels are on TV now, let alone the internet. So, it is decentralizing, and it's making it much harder for biased and moneyed, central concerns and people who have a lot of, centralization powers at the top to really control the propaganda and the news sources and what's going out. Although they still do it, and they are using the FCC and a variety of other government regulations to try to create this artificial scarcity or artificial lack of competition inside of many of these markets, especially media. I think that it's inevitable that it's falling. Look at how CNN and Fox and all of their viewer ratingship, although it might be steady, when you look at the population growth, it's actually on a decline, right? So traditional media is going out the door. It is on the internet. I have a whole life. We can make our lives off of this now, right? We actually get paid off of spreading real freedom. So back in the day, it was only political parties who could steal the money through taxation, through debt slavery, and through inflation that they could actually pay for all of their propaganda. Well, now at least we have a chance to go toe for toe with them on some level, and we can expose a lot of their criminal actions in the background and say, hey, how fair is this? I not only have to pay for my own stuff to come out here and try to talk about this stuff and bring it up, but they get to steal from me to be against me, right? So to propagandize against me. And when you bring up things like that, it really, plants a seed in somebody else's mind. That's not fair. Well, that guy's right. That's not fair. And then hopefully they'll look into a little bit more of what I'm saying. So, giving them the little sound bites that hopefully will draw that horse towards the trough. And you can't make them drink, but if you can bring them to the trough and make them thirsty, that's the real step. And I think the internet has given us that ability to connect to people who might have never talked to us, maybe be a different religion, hate the other sex or race or whatever. And now we're all connecting, and we can see each other as individuals, and seeing that the next big push really is a voluntarist movement where we respect other peaceful people's property and bodies and allow them to do whatever they want as long as they don't infringe on others.
Well, Micah, you used a couple terms there, and before you go, I want to make sure people understand exactly what you're talking about, because maybe, as libertarians, when we assert self-ownership, and we say, of course, I own myself, I am not a slave, and it's clear that there's kind of a spectrum there, right? Like there's absolute self-ownership where you own yourself, and we can assert that that is the fact of our existence. But in terms of what we experience, in America, we don't really get to exercise full self-ownership. And you can have various degrees over that. In the United States, the government makes various claims to ownership over us, to limit every limitation of our rights is a claim of ownership, a claim that violates our self-ownership. Therefore, it is a claim of some partial ownership over us. Like when the government says we get to take your income, you're a tax slave. You're because the government claims to own the product of your labor. But that's
it's involuntary. Yeah,
right,
it's involuntary. That's really the basis I try to go off of is the word involuntary.
But there's the opposite extreme, and again, it's not even a possible extreme. But if someone claims complete ownership over another person, we would think of that as just slavery, right? And of course, if you think about it in a true sense, even someone who was owned as a slave working on a plantation in America, which is the iconic American vision of slavery, although compared to slavery around the world and throughout the ages, it's really historically not as significant as a lot of Americans think it is. Not that it's any less criminal than it really is, but even in a situation like that of total ownership, the slave has psychological freedom. They get to choose their outlook. They don't have a chip in their brain that literally controls their body on behalf of the slave owner. They get to make lots of choices in their life still. So there's that spectrum. But you use the term chain slavery, and I've never heard it used that way, but I assume you're using that to differentiate like a direct sort of physical outward claim to ownership as opposed to what you called debt slavery. Can you explain how you're using those terms and why?
I usually contrast it over to political enslavement. So that's what we live under today. And I even take it to the step where I say it is a little bit nicer, right? So
certainly,
in many cases, you don't even know you're enslaved. That's how much nicer it is, right? Some people, it's so nice to them that they don't even know they're enslaved. They've been so conditioned into it that they think it's a good thing. So, obviously chain slavery where you can just whip somebody or shoot them outright. Obviously there were some laws against that in some states, and et cetera, et cetera. But you know what I'm trying to get at here, just whipping somebody.
Hold on. That's really important to point out, though, in terms of the reality of this, is that if you owned a slave in America, in the South, in the heydays of American chain slavery, the government put limits on that. So even that concept of property, of human ownership, was secondary to state ownership, right? You own the slave, but you can't shoot him. Now, hypothetically, if you own something, you are respected in your right to do what you want with it. And if that ownership was legitimate, which it's not ever, you could hypothetically, shoot a slave, and that would be a righteous use of your property, as abhorrent and destructive and wasteful and inhumane, so on. I get it as that is, but again, state ownership of everyone trumped that.
Yeah, I was just trying to get it to the fact that, there is a dichotomy that we do have to acknowledge between, chain slavery and statism slavery. And statism slavery might be nicer, but it's still horrific. It still causes lots of murders, at least 100 million plus in the last century alone, if not. Some estimates go up to 300 million. And private murders throughout all of history are estimated at under 25 million murders. So outside of non-state politically connected, no sanctions and starvation through sanctions, no wars. So just regular private murderers, it's dwarfed compared to what the state does. The state, although it is nicer than chain slavery. It's just an extension of chain slavery. It's indirect slavery. And so, I do want to make sure that people understand I'm not comparing it to directly chain slavery, but it is bad. It's something that we should stand up and reject outright. We should not have the right to control the people and their property. It just doesn't make any sense to me now that I understand this and look forward towards it. And every single thing that the government does, it doesn't have its own revenue source. It's not self-sufficient, right? It has to have the money come from somewhere. The only thing it can do to gain this revenue is steal, or to threaten to steal, which then they'll give you to, I guess, voluntarily give up your money under the guise of not being stolen from. But, in essence, it's all involuntary. All of this is involuntary in the back end, just like chain slavery was, right? Chain slavery was not voluntary. If you had the right to not be a chain slave, I guarantee you most of the people would have chose not to be chain slaves. No matter what anybody says, most people would have said, I don't want to be forced to go work in this field anymore, right? I want to go, maybe I can go work in a field on my own. And I'm not saying field work's bad. I'm just saying I don't want to be forced to go do this, right?
Or doing it for someone else.
Everybody always wants government on their neighbor, not them. Right? Mm-hmm. They're not the bad person. It's always the other persons that got to have government else. We got to get rid of that mindset that other people are bad. Most people are actually really good. Most people are my grandma or your aunt, your brother. We're actually really good people. We might make mistakes. We're mortal. We're humans. But I think on the whole, most humans are good, and they don't need some narcissistic control freak pointing around guns at other people and telling them how to live their lives. It's just absolute nonsense, and it creates a lot of perverse, unintended consequences that most people don't even really take the time to see philosophically or economically from the back end of the state. So it's really hard for us to communicate this, but this is why I think it's really important just to point out the fact that the system we're living under right now is involuntary. You don't have a choice on arbitration services. You don't have really much choice on anything with the state. And so the state is anti-choice. And if you really want to have a peaceful and free society, you got to enable peaceful and free people to have this choice. And the state will never do that. It's anti-freedom. It's anti-choice. So, it's really important just to just bringing it back to the secession movement for us to continue to understand that moving towards more individualism is a good thing. So this is why I'll usually side with people who, even though they might have some kind of a global secessionist movement for their own little region, I still support that over their opposers who are trying to actually literally enslave them into their region. So, obviously any type of decentralization that's peaceful based and people who are going to respect other people's property and bodies, I'm all for it, right? And I just hope that they take it to the next step so that they can see really what we're aiming here for is individual sovereignty and autonomy.
Outstanding. Thanks so much for joining us, Michael Shanklin of voluntaryvirtues.com. All right, if you want to get on the queue for Skype, send me a chat at Adam Kokesh. Looks like we got a bunch of people lined up here. So we're going to go from the top down. If you want to get on the top of the stack, just send me another chat to get yourself bumped so I know that you're ready to call in, or if you've just got a question that you want to have asked on the air. So Paul Staden, and this is who writes, what does it mean to be kokeshed? I tried to get that on Urban Dictionary today, and I went and clicked add, and it didn't even register. I don't know if there's something wrong with their website, but we'll see. We'll get it on there. Kokeshed. To confront someone with challenging ideas or questions. To kokesh. And then so for one of the examples was, what's the best way to, when cops are harassing you, kokeshing them is the best way to get them to leave you alone. And it's true. Get them to go away. All right. So we'd love to thank you for giving me a good kokeshing. Lol, waking me up to human freedom of choice. Now that you have had a fluoride dumper on your show, is it possible to have a chemtrail dumper on your show? Yeah. Is that you, Paul? Do we actually have a chemtrail whistleblower? Someone who'd like to come on the show? Paul, welcome to the show.
Hey. Hey.
Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
So are you a chemtrailer?
No, I do not dump the stuff, but I have stuff in the air.
Well, do you know somebody who is who is involved in geoengineering directly like that, who'd like to blow the whistle coming on Adam versus the Man? We'd love to have him on.
I think there should be. I worry about people like that. I think they might be scared to come forward, obviously, because of the whole NSA whistleblowers and all that.
The Obama administration crackdown on whistleblowers as a whole. Yeah, absolutely. Well, this is a really important subject, and it's one that a lot of Americans have this, I mean, it's like the floor. Like, no, that's impossible. The government couldn't possibly be poisoning us. Oh, no, the government couldn't possibly be spraying stuff in the air to try to control the weather. Despite overwhelming evidence that you can see in the skies every single day in America, you know something's going on, despite the concrete, tangible evidence. And maybe that's what's so scary about it, is you know that there's this, undeniable kernel of truth to the American government's geoengineering efforts. There's the various facilities that have sort of ancillary roles in this, and then we don't know the scope of it and the scale of it, and we haven't had a single whistleblower at the top. So maybe I'll take this as an opportunity then to appeal to the Adam versus the Man audience. There is not a single person who is spraying chemtrails in America who doesn't have some family or friends around them who kind of knows what they're doing. And if you know someone like this, reach out to them and talk to them. If you want them to be able to do it anonymously, we can arrange for that as well. But holy crap, yeah, it is a place where you would expect by now there'd be some whistleblowers, and there haven't been. And I suppose it's people that are, you're talking about a very few number of people that are required to pull this off: pilots, engineers, people who are running the chemicals into the planes and so on. But you can only swear so many people to secrecy before one of them goes, this is wrong, and doing the right thing is more important than my paycheck.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'd like to see. I'd like to see some good people out there actually saying, or questioning, just saying, what is this? Just like Cantwell saying, just having him do that is revolutionary, obviously, because it's just not a popular topic.
Yeah.
And I think it should be.
Well, it's not just that it's... Sorry, go ahead.
No, I know. I just think it needs to be talked about seriously instead of taking it as, like you said, it's good for you. It's all this. It's like they've said it's good for global warming or whatever like that. I don't believe that for one second.
Well, it's not just that. It's that people have, for both of these issues, it's a very negative knee-jerk reaction because it immediately challenges people's safe assumptions about government. It's like you have to be a libertarian first before you're even ready to hear it. If you think government is good and righteous and necessary and you trust it for whatever, anything, then to think, oh, it's doing this horribly obvious, wicked, destructive thing, you have to like blow a fuse in your brain to get past that. Anyway, any other thoughts on geoengineering, Paul?
I think, well, I'll tell you what, I think people should really take Kristen Megan serious.
Absolutely.
Her coming out like that is, she's got more balls than I do, and I'm not saying she's a man, but she definitely should have more support than she has right now. And I'm just sad to see that people still try to debunk her when she has 9 years of experience in her business.
Mm-hmm.
So she knows. So I would like to see some gutsy guys. I want to see real men, pilots, the guys dumping the stuff in. I want to see them come out. I would like that. Could I persuade them? No, because then I would be in, like you say, you can't force somebody. You can gradually get them to come out. But I would like to see a gutsy move. Somebody just come out, just like Kristen. Revolution, just come out and talk about it and see what happens. I think that would be a good step in the right direction instead of what it is now. I look up and I can't believe what I see. I never laid in the grass when I was 10 years old making checkerboards with clouds. Do you? Like, seriously.
Yeah. No, and you're right to point out, I think the most important thing you just said is that it really is cowardly. And it is a sign of how far we have fallen culturally. And I'm not one of these guys that's going to be like, I'm not a conservative with the fantasy of like, restoring anything or going back in time or whatever. But no, like the fact that institutionally, as a consequence of modern institutional governments, you have institutionalized cowardice of people that are engaged in programs like this where they're sworn to secrecy and then they never say anything, and they go, you know what? It does and it's one thing if you're like, well, no, it was a secret mission to take out a terrorist, and my SEAL team couldn't tell the American people about it. No. If you are doing something that affect the American people like this, that's supposedly for our own good, and you were involved in geoengineering, and you're one of, we have to say, at least dozens, if not probably hundreds, maybe even a couple thousand of, thousands of pilots who are doing this, you're a freaking coward. If you're saying, I would rather do the government's bidding in secret and never come out about it, then at least say, you know what, before I participate in this, I want to know that the American people understand what's going on, and at least through their representative government have a chance to voice an opinion about it. But if you are doing this, if you are one of these cowards, it's not too late to redeem yourself. But what you are doing is saying, I'm willing to let politicians, which is really their sponsors, the people behind them, do something in secret to the, against the American people or for the American people, or at least that the American people are paying for without their knowledge. And that is sick and cowardly.
That is a good point. We're paying for some of this shit, and I don't agree with it. All right. And I never was asked if let's say there was a program that did actually help with global warming. Or everybody seems to be thinking that the world is getting hotter. I would just like to see more people like Chris and Megan, just come out and say, hey, you know what? We got to question this. And if we're paying, that's probably why they're not coming out, is because we're probably paying for it.
Well, yeah, because the American people accept a system where this is possible.
Huge backlash.
Yeah.
I think people are going to get very angry. If I were in the position of a chemical dumper of any kind, yes, I would come forward. I wouldn't care what money you could pay me $1 million a week. I would not do that.
Yep.
Especially if I question it. If I think it might harm someone, I wouldn't do it for nothing. Not even for the best seat in the world,
Yeah, because you're a self-respecting human being who values your conscience.
Exactly. I got 3 kids, and it makes me mad when I hear about this stuff that, just like Eric Holder, for example, what gives him the right to tell us, law-abiding citizens, to basically up our gun control, get better at it, and then he goes around behind our back with our money and sells it.
Yeah, Fast and Furious.
Any sense?
Yeah.
It just blows my mind why. Well, obviously the media doesn't give a shit. They haven't talked about it that much that they should. So we got alternative news sources like yours, which I just want to thank you for waking me up. It's crazy. That's what I mean by being cold-cashed. You got smacked in the face with reality, Wake up. So, yeah, I would just like to see some more guys. And you know what? If there was any pilot that came forward who seen me or knew me or wanted to get this message out, Adam, I would have him on your show ASAP.
Oh, of course. I know. And if you're one of these pilots, you want to be an instant hero to millions of Americans and be the guy that brought that blew the whistle on this thing that millions of Americans are aware of, and just, millions more would be if we had that kind of credible whistleblower behind, all the effort to raise awareness. Paul, thanks for the call. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Adam. Appreciate it.
All right, back to the Skype chats. Who's on top here? Chris Diamond, our mutual friend Jeff Berwick has asked you. I don't know what that means. Let's see if we can get Chris Diamond on the show. Mutual friend of Jeffrey Berwick. All right, we had a lot of news stories we didn't get to today. Let's see, maybe we'll just breeze through a couple of these while we're trying to get people on. We're going to have to get into Scalia. Uh-oh, what's this? Long distance. No, it looks like we're not going to be able to get Chris Diamond on. Let's see, Mike or Eric Mackey. I think I've nailed the Jesse Ventura impression. What do you say to being my first victim? Uh-oh, we got a Jesse Ventura impersonator coming on the show. Let's see if this is any good. I don't know. My roads! My roads! Eric, welcome to the show.
Hey, Adam.
Are you going to give us video for this Jesse Ventura impersonation?
I am. Let me turn off the live feed here.
All right, excellent.
Oh, man. You caught me in the middle of eating.
Well, you Skyped me in the middle of the show. What do you expect?
All right.
All right, so
Okay,
we have a couple old chats on the Skype pile here, and when people chat me at the beginning of the show, we can't rely on them, being available when we go to take Skype calls. So we always go to the top of the sheet here, top of the recent chats, and we have a bunch of people who still, like, the instructions are there if you're watching right now at adamversustheman.com/live. Don't send me a contact request. You don't have to. I accept chats from people who aren't in my contact list. All you got to do is send me a chat with what you want to talk about, like Eric did about doing a Jesse Ventura impersonation. Still waiting on video for you, Eric. So if you want to get on the show, we got 15 minutes left. We got time to take a few more callers. Just send me a chat by Skype to Adam Kokesh. ADAMKOKESH.
Video up and going for you, but I'd have to video chat you if you're okay with that.
What does that mean?
I hang up and call you.
No, you can just turn on your video. There's a button at the bottom of the Skype screen there.
Can I? All right, walk me through it.
There's a blue button that's like you have your default set to camera off if it didn't come on automatically. See where you have the end call button, the red button.
Right. Yeah.
See the blue buttons to the left of that? One of those is turn on video.
Oh, yep, I got it.
And tomorrow we'll have Jeffrey Phillips back in the studio, and we're going to go to a new system of calling up guests to avoid all this in-between time. It's going to make the show that much faster and smoother. But until then, we have Eric Mackey with a Jesse Ventura impersonation. Let's hear it.
Actually, I began working on it after watching you and Ventura there go at it pretty much. All right. In the middle of that, I literally counted on him to like break character and grab like a WWF microphone and like all right. He'd get up and he'd be like, ready?
Okay, I'm ready now.
I'm not, but okay, here we go. He'd get up, right? He'd do that thing, Oh. How do we know right now that you're not? How do we know that you're not an Illuminati agent? How do we know that you're not tied into the government? Don't debate me, Adam. I've been governor. I've been a fighter. I went up to the top rope and I tagged in the truth.
Okay, go do some push-ups and come back. Appreciate the effort, and I see where you're going with that.
Well, thank you for having me on.
All right, thanks, Eric. Next time, maybe we'll get a better presentation. We can get Eric with the Jesse Ventura, the old school mustache. Oh, I said this. I think there were two like really wonderful redeeming things for Jesse about that interview. And one is that when the first thing he said when it started getting heated was, I don't know, teach me. And that's awesome. Like, how many people in a heated conversation like that, where you have confrontational ideas, and of course we stayed very positive the whole time, and we ended it on an extremely positive note, and I'm still a big supporter of Jesse Ventura doing his thing and being Jesse Ventura and speaking out. I love his voice being in the conversation. Great. But the fact that he was like, well, teach me, and then resisted, tried, and then he just resisted it. But the other thing is that he was wearing a tie-dye t-shirt. And the one thing I will always respect Jesse Ventura for is wearing whatever the fuck he feels like, because no one is going to tell the body otherwise. Have you seen how big that guy is? He's a fucking monster. I've met him in person. Like, when he was in his heyday, he must have been like a 300-pound bodybuilder size kind of dude. I mean, he's like, I don't know how tall he is, but he's got to be like 6'4", and he's just like a mountain of a man at 6'4". Anyway, all right, we have time for a couple more calls, but more importantly, we have someone I've been hoping to get on here. Ladies and gentlemen, we go now to the one and only Jacob Kelly, who just yesterday hosted Smoke Down Prohibition in Youngstown, Ohio. He joins us now for a recap on that event. And if you were checking out the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Adam Kokesh, you can see his interview he did for a local news station, which he did such an awesome job representing the cause and Adam versus the Man with an AVTM t-shirt. But I'm dying to hear, Jacob, thank you so much for calling in at the end of the show here. I am dying to hear how exactly this went down and how you are not in jail right now.
Okay, so what happened was that on Thursday, right after I got interviewed by you here on your show, I got a call from the local police that they are going, and they basically what they said is that they are going to arrest anybody that shows up for the protest, because they said that we are in violation of City Ordinance 541.16, which is trespassing on a public place of amusement. They said that the whole park was rented out for a family event that day.
Which was not true, according to the park administrator that was interviewed in that video. But more importantly, I want to point out that this is essentially a promise to arrest you for a thought crime. Now, just untangle this for just a second here. We're going to arrest anybody who shows up to the park with the intent of joining a protest, not for protesting, not for engaging in protest behavior, not for expressing themselves, but if they show up with the intent of being a part of this protest, we're going to arrest them. Now, I also have to point out that it's been demonstrated, or the Supreme Court has ruled that police don't have to tell you the truth at all. They have no obligation legally to not lie to you. That a cop lying to you has no liability for what they say. So if they say we're going to arrest you, it can be an idle threat, and within the color of the law, that's totally legitimate. Please continue.
Yes, what you just said was completely true. It was a lie. Nothing of that occurred, and because I was even told the day before on Saturday, I met with another officer, and he told me directly into my face-to-face conversation, that anybody that sets foot into the park will get arrested. So at that point, I kind of believed them. I did believe them, but I wasn't going to back down from the event, so I just told everybody on the page that, oh, this is what the police said. There's a threat of possibly that happening. I'm changing this to a First Amendment right kind of thing. And a lot of people did message me back on Facebook and said, I cannot risk arrest and I cannot show up.
Now, hold on a second. I want to, if I may interrupt just for a little comment here on this. You made I want to commend your tactical decision here, because you set out with the intent of engaging in civil disobedience for marijuana, where you were willing to risk arrest to make the point. This wasn't part of a specific campaign to change the law. This was, you want to raise awareness, you want to make a point, you're willing to make a sacrifice and take a risk in order to do that. And in the process of doing that, realize that even the fundamental right to protest was not being respected in your community, and you decided to say, you know what, let's fall, instead of lobbing bombs deep behind enemy lines and hoping that we break through somehow, you're saying, like, no, there's a fight right here that is more immediate and fundamental, that is even more righteous, that we have an immediate chance to win. And I think that was a wise tactical decision.
Yes, thank you so much, because I got a lot of heat from my friends and from the police officers that I know, calling me a bitch and calling me out for not actually doing the whole full-scale event. Because when they said that they're going to arrest us for being in the park, I prepared for it. I got a lawyer that I was going to contact over it. I emailed you about it so you could cover it on air. And I made sure, I even contacted my professors that I might not be in class because I will get arrested for setting foot in the park. So I planned accordingly to what the police said. When we got there, none of the police showed up. There were no police to be seen anywhere. So we went on with the event. I gave some speeches. We had about 20 people there. And because I was expecting to get arrested for being in the park, I did not have marijuana on me since I was just a 20-year-old and with no money. So I was going to take one charge and fight that one charge fully. So, but instead, this lady, really cool lady, had weed cookies with her. So when the police finally showed up at 4:15, expecting us all to smoke, I went and I tried to shake their hands, and they wouldn't. And I just said that, thank you for coming and being a support of the cause or whatever. And I ate a weed cookie in front of them. And, and I didn't get arrested for that. And,
did you tell them what it was?
What was that?
Did you tell them what it was you were eating?
No.
All right. So you went ahead in a covert way with that part of the civil disobedience, but no, this is wonderful, and I want to point out that, you know, the point of civil disobedience is not to get arrested. The point of civil disobedience is to raise awareness and change policy.
Yes.
And what you did was an incredible act of defiance that was civil disobedience, because while not against the law, it was against law enforcement to go to the park for an unpermitted protest. And by unpermitted,
yes,
obviously, you know what we mean. Permitted certainly under the First Amendment of the Constitution, which you so well pointed out in that interview that we featured on our channel. And as you pointed out when you first mentioned your approach to this, and I think you've established yourself now as someone in your community who can be expected to take that stand, who can be a leader, who can stand up to the authorities. And the authorities now know you as a guy who's peaceful and nonviolent and respectful, and who can conduct something like this in a way that is befitting the message of freedom.
Yes, exactly, because everybody that attended said that they had a great time. I'm happy I got to meet other libertarians, other pro-marijuana people, and it was a good get-together. And also, I do plan to write a thank you note to the local police department, and I will thank them for not arresting us and being part of it. And I would express my gratefulness to them that they acted peacefully as well that day.
Now, I have to admit, I've been trolling your Facebook page today because I was hoping that you would post some more video or some more updates about what happened. You have video coming, right?
Yes, I do have a video of it, but it's not that really exciting because I really wanted the police to come and encroach on us and try to arrest. Well, I didn't want it, but that was the plan, to come and arrest us for being in the park. But that didn't happen, and also we had because of that threat, people were scared, and we had lower attendance. We had like 18 people come out of the 60 that said they would come.
Well, actually, by Facebook numbers, that's pretty good. But I want to point out something very specific, because I noticed your father is on your Facebook page, and he seems generally very supportive of what you're doing, correct?
Yes, that is true, and that is awesome, because I was expecting, a lot of my family really don't condone a lot of what I do, but my dad, I think, over time, I have convinced them to become a libertarian and a voluntarist, and he is now supportive of it, and he sees the evilness of the government that he failed to see before.
Excellent. Well, there's one thing I'd like to point out, because your dad did say something, as I noticed in his general message of support, that to me as a libertarian was extremely offensive. Can you guess what it was?
Not sure.
All right. Well, since you didn't respond to call your dad out, I'm going to do it right here on the air. Hopefully, this will help him a little bit in his journey into ANCAPiness. And he said that you didn't protect the First Amendment. The police stood up and protected free speech and the First Amendment. And now, neither of those are legitimate possibilities. You as an individual cannot protect the First Amendment. It is words on paper. That's all it is. You can stand up for the principles behind it. You can assert your own rights to express yourself, but you cannot defend words on paper. And not only did the police not do that, they did not stand up for any of those principles. They showed up on stolen funds, so paying their salaries and for their equipment and for their costumes and their weapons. And they showed up to exercise and be a the will and the power of the state and represent the politicians that guarantee them their jobs. They did not protect. If someone had been threatening you, if someone said, Jacob, I disagree with your protest, and I'm just going to come and shoot all of those damn hippies when they come and gather in the park. And if the cops came and stopped them, then you could say, yes, the cops were protecting your expression. They were protecting your physical integrity there in the park in that moment. They were standing up for your right to exist peacefully. But that was not the case. In fact, the only potential threat was the police. And while the fact that they backed down in that circumstance is commendable and to be celebrated, they weren't protecting shit.
Yeah, I cannot agree more with that, and I will definitely send what you just said, the audio file, to my dad and see what he has to say.
All right, I'm sure that's something you would have no problem helping him out with on your own. You don't need my help there, but you can, if you have to be like, well, Adam had a little response for you today, maybe you can use that as a conversation starter. But obviously, you're very fortunate to have the support of your family in this, at least your father, and to know that you have someone who's going through that process, and hopefully he'll bring the rest of the family with him.
Yeah. Definitely, because I've been in a lot of arguments with my family, and a lot of arguments have been pro-statist from their side. So hopefully they're seeing past the statist paradigm and getting into it, because I want my beliefs and my family's beliefs to be together, so we can stand together and make one kind of group of unique libertarians against the state, and we can call ourselves the Kelly family number 2 or whatever.
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining us, Jacob. Really appreciate it. Best of luck. We look forward to your videos coming out of this event, and we know that you're going to continue this activism and keep setting an example for other listeners. All right, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for joining us on the Adam versus the Man podcast. If you want to get involved with the show as a volunteer, or as if you'd like to be hired as a producer, let us know. Send us an email, adam@adamversustheman.com. Please support the show by going to adamversustheman.com/invest. And what else are we supposed to say here? Oh, yeah. How many statists does it take to change a light bulb? Well, so long as 51% agree, it takes 5 to write a law to make changing light bulbs mandatory, 10 to force someone from the 49% to change the light bulb against their will, 3 to place charges against anyone unwilling to change the light bulb, 12 to decide if that someone is guilty of not changing the light bulb, 20 to keep that person locked up against their will for not changing the light bulb, and 100 to spread fear and hatred about anti-light bulb changers in the media. This brought to you by WTI.liberty.me. Cool, huh?